The night was heavy with silence. The wind carried the smell of rain, and the moon hid behind clouds as though afraid to witness what was about to happen. Somewhere in the middle of the kingdom of Arentia, a lonely prince walked quietly through the forest paths, away from the golden palace where he was born. His name was Prince Jude. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with pale skin that glowed under the moonlight and hair as golden as the morning sun. To his people, he was a symbol of pride and strength, the son of King Roland and Queen Maria, rulers of the kingdom. To the elders, he was the future of Arentia, the one who would one day sit on the throne and continue the long line of kings. But to himself, Jude was more than a crown, more than a title. He was a young man with a heart that longed for something deeper than gold, power, or respect. And that longing had led him here to the edge of the forest, where a girl waited under the wide branches of an old tree. Her name was Elara. She was not royal. She was not noble. She was the daughter of a poor healer who lived in the small village near the river. Her life was simple, gathering herbs, mixing medicines, helping her mother treat the sick. Yet she carried a beauty that no jewel could match. Her skin was pale like carved ivory, her hair dark as the raven's wing, and her eyes the soft green of new leaves after rain. But it was not her beauty that captured Jude's heart. It was her spirit. She was gentle, but not weak. She was humble, but her voice could cut through pride. She laughed easily, but carried wisdom beyond her years. The prince had met her by chance. Months ago, he had ridden out beyond the palace walls without guards, disguised as a common man. His horse had stumbled on a rough path, throwing him to the ground and bruising his leg. Elara, who had been nearby gathering herbs, had rushed to him. She did not bow, did not ask for gold, did not even know who he was. She simply cared for his wound, cleaned it with her herbs, and stayed by him until he could walk again. That night, Jude had returned to the palace with more than a bandaged leg. He had returned with a heart stolen. Since then, he had met her again and again, in secret, always hidden from the eyes of the kingdom. On this night, when the sky seemed to whisper warnings, Jude stood before her, his hands trembling as he took hers. "Elara," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence of the forest. "Every day I spend without you feels like a prison. I am the prince of this land, yet my freedom lies only here, in your presence." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And yet, you are bound to a throne that will never allow me beside you. Do you think your father will bless this love? Do you think the council of elders will bow to me, the daughter of a poor healer?" Jude shook his head firmly. "I do not care what they think. Let the throne burn if it must. I will not let their rules chain my heart. I was born into royalty, but I was not born to live without love." Her fingers tightened around his, but her voice carried fear. "Your words are brave, Jude, but bravery cannot stop the anger of a king. If they discover us, what will they do to you? To me?" The prince looked into her eyes, his own burning with fire. "Then let them discover us. I will protect you. I will fight the world itself if it tries to tear you from me." But even as he spoke, the shadows around them seemed to shift. For love is never hidden for long, especially when it blossoms in forbidden places. Far away, in the golden palace, King Roland sat upon his throne, his face stern, his mind filled with plans. He was a man of ambition, one who believed that kingdoms were built not on love but on power and alliances. For weeks, he had been arranging a marriage between his son Jude and Princess Celine, the daughter of a mighty ruler from across the sea. With such a marriage, Arentia would become stronger than ever, untouchable by enemies. But whispers had already reached his ears. Whispers of the prince wandering outside the palace at night. Whispers of secret meetings with a village girl. At first, the king had dismissed them. But the whispers grew louder, until they became too heavy to ignore. One of the palace guards, sharp-eyed and suspicious, had followed Jude's steps. And what he saw made his blood run cold. The heir to the throne, holding hands with a commoner beneath the old tree, speaking words that no prince should dare speak. The guard did not wait until dawn. He returned at once, bowing before the king, his voice low but urgent. "My lord," he said, "forgive me, but I must speak what I have seen. The prince, your son, he is in love with a village girl. He meets her in secret, outside the palace walls." The king's face turned red with fury, his voice thundering across the hall. "What madness is this? My son, the future king, defiling his honor with a common girl. He will not shame this throne. He will not." Queen Maria, seated beside him, placed a hand gently on his arm. Her eyes were softer, her voice calm. "Roland, he is young. His heart has found what it wants. Can we truly command love as we command armies?" But the king's voice rose even louder. "A heart that disobeys its king is a heart unfit to rule. He will marry Princess Celine, or he will cease to be my son." That night, the drums of anger beat within the palace walls. Orders were given. Spies were sent. And in the forest, where Jude and Elara thought themselves safe, danger was already weaving its net. The next morning, Jude was summoned to the throne room. He walked with his head high, though inside, his heart pounded. He knew what was coming. He knew the whispers had reached his father. The great hall was filled with elders, nobles, and guards. The torches burned bright, casting shadows on the tall golden pillars. At the far end, King Roland sat upon his throne, his eyes cold as steel. Beside him sat Queen Maria, her face pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Jude," the king's voice rang out, deep and harsh, "it has come to my ears that you have betrayed this throne. That you have cast aside your duty, your honor, and your blood, to chase the foolish love of a common girl. Tell me it is a lie, and I will forgive your wandering. Tell me it is true, and you will no longer call yourself my son." The hall fell silent. All eyes were on the prince. Jude stepped forward, his voice steady though his heart was heavy. "It is true. I love her. I love Elara with all that I am. And if that love means losing my crown, then so be it." Gasps filled the room. The elders shook their heads. Some nobles muttered curses under their breath. Queen Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. The king rose to his feet, his fury like fire. "Then you are a fool. Do you not see that love will not feed a kingdom? That love will not protect us from enemies? You are a prince, Jude, and your life does not belong to you, it belongs to Arinthia." But Jude did not bow. He stood tall, his voice rising with passion. "And what is Arinthia without its heart? What is a kingdom without love? If I cannot rule as a man who follows his heart, then I do not deserve to rule at all." The hall erupted into chaos. Voices clashed, elders shouted, guards shifted uneasily. The king raised his hand, and silence fell once more. His face was cold, his words sharp as knives. "Then hear me, Jude, son of Roland. If you choose this path, you will lose your title, your birthright, your future. From this day forward, you will not be prince, but a man without a crown. And the girl you love, she will not escape my wrath. I will see her cast out, far from this land, where you will never find her again." The words struck Jude's heart like thunder, but he did not waver. His voice broke the silence once more. "Then strip me of my crown, father. Take your throne, your power, your dreams of alliances. I will not betray Elara. I choose her, even if the whole world turns against me." The hall fell silent once more, the weight of his words pressing on every soul. And so the story began, not of a prince bound by duty, but of a man bound by love. For when Jude chose Elara over the throne, he set fire to a path that would test not only his heart, but the strength of love itself. The morning sun rose over Arinthia, casting golden light on the palace towers. But inside the walls of that palace, the air was heavy with anger and grief. The words of the night before still echoed in the halls. Prince Jude had defied his father, King Roland, and chosen love over the throne. The people of the kingdom had not yet heard the truth. In the villages, they still believed their prince was the shining hope of the future. In the markets, mothers still told their children that one day Jude would wear the crown and bring peace. But inside the palace, everything had changed. King Roland paced back and forth in his chambers, his fist clenched. His voice was low, but it shook with fury. He dares to shame me, in front of the elders, in front of the council. My own son. Choosing a peasant girl over his blood, his throne, his duty. This cannot be tolerated. This kingdom is not built on the weakness of the heart. It is built on strength, alliances, and power. Queen Maria sat quietly near the window, her face pale. She loved her son deeply, but her husband's fury was like a storm, nothing could stop it. Roland, she said softly, you may break his crown, but do not break his life. He is still your child. The king turned sharply toward her, his eyes like burning coal. From the moment he chose that girl, he ceased to be my child. He is no prince of mine. Meanwhile, Jude sat in his chamber, stripped of his royal robes. The golden chain that once marked him as heir was gone from his neck. The guards who once bowed to him now stood at his door as if he were a prisoner. Yet his spirit was not broken. His heart still beat strong with the thought of Elara. His friend and loyal servant, Elias, slipped quietly into the room. Elias had been with Jude since childhood, more like a brother than a servant. His face was full of worry as he whispered, my prince, no, forgive me, Jude, do you understand what you have done? The king has stripped you of your birthright. You have no throne, no crown, no place here. Jude lifted his eyes, calm but firm. I know. But what is a throne without love? If I must live as a common man to have Elara, then I will. Elias shook his head in fear. You do not understand. The king is not only stripping you of the crown. He plans to banish you. He will send you into exile, away from the palace, away from this land. And worse, he has sworn to destroy Elara if you ever try to see her again. For a moment, Jude's chest tightened. The thought of losing Elara, of never seeing her again, was more painful than losing a crown. But then his eyes burned with determination. If he casts me out, then I will go. But nothing will keep me from Elara. Not his threats, not his armies. I will find her. I will protect her. And so, before the sun reached its height in the sky, the king's judgment was announced. The great drums of the palace thundered, calling all the people to the central square. Men, women, and children gathered, their faces filled with curiosity and fear. The air smelled of dust and sweat as the crowd pressed close together, whispering among themselves. King Roland stood on the high balcony, his crown gleaming in the sun. His voice carried across the square like thunder. People of Arinthia, he began, hear your king. My son, Jude, has betrayed his duty. He has chosen a path of weakness, a path unworthy of this kingdom. From this day forward, he is no longer prince, no longer heir to the throne. He is banished from this palace and from the royal house. Let all know that he has chosen a life apart from us. Gasps rose from the crowd. Mothers held their children close. Old men shook their heads in sorrow. Some wept, for they had loved Jude, the prince who had walked among them, spoken with them, listened to their troubles. But others muttered, the king is right. A prince must serve the kingdom, not his own heart. Through the heavy silence, Jude stepped forward. His head was high, his shoulders strong, though his robes were plain. He looked not at the crowd, not at the king, but at the white sky above him, as if he were already free. When he spoke, his voice was steady, carrying across the square. People of Arinthia, I am no longer your prince. That title has been taken from me. But know this, I have not betrayed you. I have only followed my heart. If to love is weakness, then let me be weak. If to love is shame, then I will carry that shame with pride. For love is greater than crowns, greater than thrones, greater than the pride of kings. The crowd fell silent, struck by his words. Some wept louder. Others bowed their heads. King Roland's face darkened, but he said nothing more. He lifted his hand, and the guard stepped forward. They opened the palace gates, and Jude walked out not as a prince, but as a man cast into the world. He did not look back. But in his heart, one name burned like fire, Elara. The path of exile was harsh. Jude traveled through the villages, through fields and forests. Some people recognized him and offered him bread, water, or a place to rest. Others turned away, fearful of the king's wrath. But Jude did not stop. His only thought was to reach Elara, to see her, to hold her once more. Meanwhile, Elara had heard the news. A messenger from the market had rushed to her mother's hut, breathless with the story. The prince has been cast out. The king has banished him for loving you. Elara's heart nearly stopped. She dropped the basket of herbs in her hands, her breath shallow. Banished, she whispered. Because of me. Her mother, wise and gentle, placed a hand on her shoulder. Child, love is never a sin. But the word of kings is cruel. If Jude has chosen you, then you must be strong, for hard days lie ahead. That night, Elara sat by the river where she and Jude had first spoken. The water flowed quietly, the moonlight dancing on its surface. Her tears fell into the river as she whispered, Jude, where are you? Will I see you again? But love, when true, always finds its way. 2 nights later, Jude arrived at the village. His clothes were dusty, his face weary, but his eyes were full of fire. He found Elara by the river, waiting, as though her heart had called him there. When she saw him, she ran into his arms, her sobs shaking her body. They said you were gone forever, she cried. They said the king would destroy us both. He held her tightly, his voice low but firm. Let him try. I would rather die with you than live without you. I have nothing left but my love for you, and that is enough. They stayed by the river until dawn, holding each other, whispering promises. But even as the sun rose, shadows grew around them. For the king's wrath was not yet finished. In the palace, King Roland sat with his council. His face was grim. Exile was not enough. As long as that girl lives, Jude's rebellion will remain alive in his heart. She must be removed. The elders nodded, their voices cold. Yes, my king. The healer's daughter is a danger. Remove her, and the prince will forget. But Queen Maria, her eyes filled with sorrow, whispered, No, Roland. Do not harm the girl. If you destroy her, you destroy what little remains of your son. The king's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his silence was heavy with decision. And so, the seeds of greater conflict were sown. Jude and Elara had found each other again, but the shadow of the king's anger loomed closer. Love had brought them together, but would love be strong enough to withstand the wrath of a crown? The story of exile had only just begun. The sun rose slowly over the land of Arinthia, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold. The villages awoke to the sound of roosters, the smell of wood smoke, and the busy steps of women carrying water from the river. But in the little hut at the edge of the forest, where Lara lived with her mother, the morning was heavy with fear and hope. Jude had spent the night there, resting for the first time since his exile. His face was calm as he lay on a simple mat, the prince who had once slept on golden sheets now wrapped in rough blankets. Yet he felt no shame. For the first time, he was free. For the first time, he slept without the weight of a crown pressing on his chest. And when he opened his eyes to see Elara smiling softly beside him, he felt richer than any king alive. But outside, danger was already gathering. King Roland had not slept. He had spent the night pacing in his grand hall, his crown shining in the torchlight as his anger burned hotter than fire. He had given his son a chance to obey, but Jude had chosen rebellion. Worse still, the people whispered of his courage, some even praising his words of love. If Jude remained with Elara, he would become more than a lost prince. He would become a symbol that love was greater than kings. And that the king could never allow. So he summoned his most trusted captain, a man named Geraint. Geraint was tall, broad, and feared throughout the land. His armor was dark as iron, and his sword had tasted the blood of many battles. He bowed before the king, his voice low. "You called for me, my lord." The king's voice was sharp. "The prince has defied me. He hides with the healer's daughter. I want her gone. Take your men. Find her. Bring her to me, or end her life. Without her, Jude will have nothing to cling to." Queen Maria, who sat nearby, gasped. "Roland, no. She is but a girl. Do not stain your hands with her blood." But the king's face was like stone. "The throne demands sacrifice. If Jude will not give her up, then I shall take her from him." The queen's eyes filled with tears, but she said no more. Her words were powerless against the fury of her husband. Captain Geraint bowed his head. It will be done. And so, the hunt began. In the village, life carried on as if nothing had changed. Children laughed, chasing each other through the dusty paths. Women pounded yam in wooden mortars, the sound echoing through the air. Men sharpened their tools for the day's labor. But in Elara's heart, a storm raged. She knew the king would not rest. She knew danger would come. As Jude sat with her outside the hut, he noticed the worry in her eyes. He took her hand, his voice gentle. "What troubles you, my love?" She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Your father will not stop. He is a king, and kings do not accept defeat. He will come for me, Jude. I fear he will destroy me to break you." Jude's grip tightened. "Then let him come. I will stand between you and his wrath. I may no longer have a crown, but I still have my strength, my will, and my love. I will not let him harm you." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "But how can we fight a king?" Jude lifted his chin, his eyes fierce. "We will not fight as kings fight, with armies and steel. We will fight with faith, with courage, with love. The people know me. They know I stood for them before. If my father seeks to destroy us, then the people will see the truth of his heart. And love, Elara love can move mountains." Her heart swelled with both pride and fear. She believed him, yet she knew the road ahead would be dark. That night, under the silver glow of the moon, Jude and Elara sat by the river where their love had first bloomed. The water flowed quietly, carrying their reflections on its surface. "Elara," Jude said softly, "when I was a prince, I thought I was strong. But strength meant nothing until I found you. You gave me a reason to live beyond duty. You gave me a heart worth fighting for. Promise me, no matter what happens, you will never doubt my love." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I promise. And you must promise me the same. For if the king tears us apart, I do not want you to forget who I was to you." He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. "Nothing could ever make me forget." But even as they spoke, dark figures moved through the forest. Captain Geraint and his soldiers had tracked them. The sound of boots pressing against dry leaves filled the night, but Jude and Elara, lost in each other's arms, did not hear. Suddenly, the silence broke. A harsh voice rang out. "There they are." Jude leapt to his feet, pulling Elara behind him. His eyes burned as he saw the armored men step from the shadows, their swords gleaming in the moonlight. Geraint stood at the front, his face grim. "Prince Jude, Geraint's voice thundered, "You are no longer heir to the throne. By the order of King Roland, the girl must come with us. Step aside, and your life will be spared." Jude's voice rose like fire. "She will not live with you. If my father sent you, then tell him this: I am no longer his son, but I will never abandon her." Geraint's eyes narrowed. "Do not make this harder than it must be. You cannot fight us all." Jude spread his arms, shielding Elara with his body. "Then I will fall before you touch her." Elara's heart pounded, her hands trembling. She had no weapon, no power, but she would not leave Jude's side. Her voice rang out, steady despite her fear. "If you take me through his blood and mine. For I will not leave him." The soldiers hesitated, moved by her courage. But Geraint's face hardened. He lifted his sword. "So be it." The clash began. Jude fought with the strength of a lion. Though he had no sword, he grabbed a fallen branch from the ground and swung it like a weapon. He struck one soldier across the chest, sending him tumbling. He blocked another's blade, sparks flying as steel met wood. His body moved with the grace of a warrior trained from birth, but the odds were heavy. Elara cried out as the soldiers pressed closer. She grabbed a stone from the riverbank and hurled it at one attacker, striking him on the head. He stumbled back, cursing. Her courage shone like fire, small but unyielding. Still, the fight grew desperate. Jude's branch splintered under the force of a blade. Sweat poured down his face, his muscles burning. But even as he faltered, he stood firm, refusing to let the soldiers pass. At last, Geraint raised his hand. "Enough," he barked. The soldiers froze, stepping back. Geraint's eyes locked on Jude, then on Elara. His voice was cold. "You cannot win, Jude. Not tonight. But hear me, this is not the end. The king will have what he seeks, one way or another." He sheathed his sword and motioned for his men to retreat. One by one, they melted back into the shadows, leaving only the sound of the river and Jude's heavy breathing. Jude dropped to his knees, his chest heaving. Elara rushed to him, her hands on his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You fought them all," she whispered. "You stood like a king." He looked into her eyes, his voice hoarse but steady. "I am no king. I am only a man who loves you. And that gives me more strength than any crown ever did." They held each other tightly, knowing the battle was only beginning. The king's wrath would not rest. Geraint would return. The kingdom itself now seemed to stand against them. But their love had endured the first storm. And in that moment, under the moonlight, Jude swore silently to himself, he would face every shadow, every sword, every trial, so long as it meant keeping Elara safe. The wrath of a king was mighty. But the power of love was greater still. The storm had passed, but the kingdom still trembled under its shadow. The court was restless, the people whispered in the markets, and every night the elders sat in long meetings, debating whether Prince Jude was truly fit to rule if his heart was so openly bound to a commoner. For the first time in years, the palace felt cold, like a house where joy had fled and left only the weight of duty. Jude, however, was unshaken. His love for Elara was like a tree with deep roots, impossible to pull out even in the strongest wind. He no longer cared about whispers. Yet he knew one truth: if he were to be king, his people needed to accept Elara too. Otherwise, their lives would be full of battles between love and duty. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon with shades of crimson and gold, the high priestess of the land, a woman named Seraphine, came to the palace. She was feared and respected, for she was said to speak with the spirits of the ancestors. Her eyes were sharp, her hair white as fresh snow, and her voice was heavy with mystery. She stood before the king and queen, with Jude at their side, and said, "There can be no peace in this land until love is tested. True love must face trial, for it is in trials that the ancestors reveal their blessings." What do you mean? Jude asked, his hand tightening around Elara's. The priestess looked at him, then at Elara. If this bond is of truth and not of desire, then both of you must pass the trial of the spirits. You must journey into the forest of echoes, where no man or woman enters without meeting their deepest fears. Only those whose hearts are pure return together. If one falters, the bond is broken. The court gasped. The forest of echoes was a place of dread. Legends told of hunters who entered and never came back, of voices calling from the trees, of shadows that walked without bodies. It was said that the forest tested not the body but the soul, and many souls were too weak to stand. The queen's voice trembled. Is this truly necessary? Seraphine's reply was firm. Without trial, love is nothing but fragile glass. With trial, love is a sword of steel. Jude did not hesitate. He stepped forward, bowing his head. If that is what it takes, then I will go. And I will return with her. He turned to Elara, his eyes burning with determination. If you will walk with me. Elara, though fear clutched her heart, lifted her chin. I would walk through fire for you, Jude. I will face whatever waits in that forest. The priestess smiled faintly, though her eyes gave no warmth. Then at dawn, you shall go. That night, Elara sat by her small window in the palace guest chamber, staring at the moonlight spilling across the garden. She thought of her old life, of days when her only worry was whether her father's nets would catch enough fish. She wondered how she had come here into a palace of marble and gold, into the arms of a prince, and now toward a forest that could take her very soul. Fear pressed heavily on her chest, but whenever she closed her eyes, she saw Jude's face, steady and kind. That gave her strength. Meanwhile, Jude sat in his chamber, sharpening his sword, though he knew it would be useless in the forest. He thought of his people, of the crown that awaited him, and of the whispers that said he was a fool. But above all, he thought of Elara, and he promised himself that nothing, no spirit, no fear would take her from him. At dawn, the priestess led them to the edge of the forest of echoes. The air there was colder, the trees thicker, their branches clawing at the sky like bony fingers. Ravens perched silently, watching. The path ahead seemed to vanish into mist. Take nothing but your courage, Seraphine commanded. No food, no weapons, no charms. Only your heart. For it is your heart that will be tested. The king and queen stood behind, their faces tight with worry. The court murmured, some in pity, others in doubt. But Jude and Elara held hands, and together they stepped into the mist. At once, the world changed. The light dimmed, though it was morning. The air was heavy, and every sound seemed to echo strangely, as though the trees themselves whispered their footsteps back to them. They walked for hours, or what felt like hours, until they came to a clearing. There, suddenly, Jude saw a figure standing before him. His breath caught. It was his late brother Prince Adrian, who had died in battle years ago. His armor was blood-stained, his eyes filled with disappointment. You chose love over duty, the phantom said. Because of you, our bloodline will weaken. You shame the crown. Jude's chest ached. He had loved his brother deeply, and his death had haunted him. Now the vision stabbed at his guilt. But then he felt Elara's hand squeeze his. He looked at her quiet strength, and said firmly, no. Love does not weaken a crown. Love strengthens it. I will not turn back. The vision dissolved into mist. Elara then faced her own trial. She saw her father, frail and poor, standing by the river. His voice shook. You left me for riches. You forgot me when you entered the palace. Have you become too fine to be my daughter? Her heart broke, for her father had been her world. Tears filled her eyes, and guilt gnawed at her. But she remembered his real words, spoken the day she left, be brave, my daughter. Live fully. She wiped her tears and whispered, "I will never forget you, father. And I have not chosen riches. I have chosen love." The figure vanished into smoke. They continued, each step heavier than the last, until they reached the heart of the forest. There, the ground split into two parts. One part shone with golden light, easy and smooth, leading out of the forest. The other was dark, tangled with thorns, echoing with screams and cries. A voice roared like thunder through the trees. "Choose the path of comfort or the path of truth. Only those who choose truth will prove their love." Without hesitation, Jude stepped toward the thorny path. Elara followed, though fear gnawed at her belly. They walked together, thorns scratching their skin, shadows whispering lies in their ears, until at last they burst into another clearing. The mist lifted. The sun poured down. And before them stood the priestess Seraphine, smiling with rare softness. "You have faced fear, guilt, and choice. And still you stood together. Your love is true." The forest seemed to exhale, the heavy air lifting. The trees were just trees again. Jude and Elara stumbled out of the forest, bruised and weary, but their hands still locked together. When they returned to the palace, the people who had doubted them fell silent. For no ordinary bond could have survived the forest of echoes. Slowly, whispers turned into respect, and respect into acceptance. But though they had won the trial, another challenge lay ahead: the crown itself, and the question of whether a prince could truly rule with love above all. The palace was silent that night, but it was not the kind of silence that brings peace. It was the silence of fear, the silence of people holding their breath. The wind outside howled through the trees like a beast hungry for prey, and the thunder roared across the hills. Inside, torches flickered in the corridors as if the flames themselves were trembling. Prince Jude sat by the window of his chamber, staring at the storm. His face was pale, his eyes dark with worry. His heart had never felt so heavy. Earlier that day, he had stood before the king, his father, and spoken words that had shaken the throne itself. "I love her, father. No matter what the council says, no matter what the people expect, I will not give her up. Liana is my heart. Without her, I am nothing." The king had not shouted as Jude feared. Instead, his father had leaned back in his great chair, his golden crown tilted forward as if even it was weary. His voice had been calm, but it carried the weight of mountains. "You are the heir to this kingdom. Your choices do not belong only to you. They belong to every man, woman, and child who looks to you for leadership. Can you bear that?" Jude had stood his ground, though his legs trembled beneath him. "I can bear it, father, but I cannot bear a life without love. A king who rules without love rules with an empty hand." The council had hissed and murmured like a pit of snakes. Some demanded the girl be cast away. Others warned of curses and traditions broken. But Jude had looked only at his father, waiting for the storm to fall. Now, hours later, he still did not know what his father would decide. Across the palace courtyard, in a chamber prepared for her, Liana sat in the corner of her bed, her fingers clutching the silver pendant Jude had given her when they were only children. She was not afraid for herself, she was afraid for him. She knew the power of tradition. She knew how heavy the crown was, even before it rested on Jude's head. She remembered the words of her grandmother, the storyteller who raised her: "Love is like fire, child. It gives light, but it can also burn. Be careful how you carry it." Now, the fire of their love burned brighter than ever, but she wondered if it would burn the whole kingdom to ash. A knock came at her door. She rose quickly, heart pounding. When she opened it, she saw a young maid with wide eyes. "My lady," the maid whispered, "the council has gathered in secret. They plan to bring judgment before the king at dawn. They say you are cursed, that you must leave or the kingdom will suffer." Leona's blood ran cold. "And the prince? They say he will be forced to choose his crown or his heart." The maid bowed her head, tears filling her eyes. "Forgive me, my lady, but I fear for you both." Lyanna closed the door and leaned against it, her breath coming fast. She knew what this meant. The council was strong, and their words carried power. If the king bent to their will, Jude would face the most painful choice of his life. She sat back down on the bed and whispered into the darkness, "Oh, gods of the river and sky, if love is a curse, then let me carry it alone. Spare him." But outside, the storm only roared louder. When dawn broke, the palace bells rang not the clear chimes of celebration, but the heavy toll of judgment. The great hall filled with nobles, elders, and guards. The air was thick with whispers and the rustle of silk robes. At the center stood Jude, his chin high, his eyes fierce. Behind him, Lyanna stood quietly, her hands folded, her face calm though her heart raced like a wild horse. The king entered, his robe trailing behind him like a river of gold. He sat upon his throne, his crown gleaming even in the dim light. To his right, the council lined up like vultures ready to feast. The oldest of them, Lord Cavan, stepped forward. His beard was long, his eyes sharp. He raised his staff and spoke. "Great king, noble council, and people of this land, we are gathered to preserve the soul of our kingdom. This girl, this outsider, has cast a spell upon our prince. She clouds his judgment. She tempts him to abandon the path of kings. If we allow her to remain, we invite ruin upon ourselves." The whole murmured in agreement. Some nodded, some frowned. Jude stepped forward, fire in his voice. "She is no curse. She is no outsider. She is my love, my chosen one. If you strike her down, you strike me as well." Lord Cavan sneered. "You are blinded, prince. A king must see clearly. You cannot lead with your heart tangled in the hands of a girl." Jude's voice rose like thunder. "Better to rule with a heart full of love than with one turned to stone." Gasps filled the hall. Never before had a prince spoken so boldly against the council. The king raised his hand, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. His eyes, deep and unreadable, moved from Jude to Lyanna. "Step forward, child," he said. Lyanna's feet felt heavy as stones, but she walked forward until she stood before the throne. She bowed her head low. "Tell me," the king said, his voice steady. "Do you love my son?" "Yes, my king," she whispered. "With all that I am." "Would you give him up to save him?" Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at Jude, who stared at her with eyes full of desperation. She wanted to scream no, never. But she also remembered her grandmother's warning. Love was fire. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke. "If it is what will save him, then yes. I would walk away. But my heart would never leave him." The hall grew silent. Even the council seemed struck. Jude's hands clenched into fists. "Father, no. You cannot let her go." "I will not." Silence, the king's voice rang out. He stood, his crown catching the first light of dawn streaming through the tall windows. "I have heard enough. It is time for my judgment." Every soul in the hall held their breath. The king looked at Jude, then at Lyanna, then at the council. "You speak of curses, but I see only courage. You speak of spells, but I see only love. Tell me, what kingdom survives without love? What king rules without it? Love does not weaken a man, it makes him strong." The council erupted in protest, but the king struck his staff on the floor, and thunder seemed to answer. "My son has chosen, and so have I. This girl will not be cast out. She will stand by him. And when the time comes, she will be queen." Gasps and cries filled the hall, but Jude rushed forward, dropping to his knees before his father. "Thank you, father," he whispered, voice breaking with relief. Behind him, Lyanna covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. She could hardly believe what she had heard. The king raised his hands for silence. But hear me, Jude. Love is fire, and fire must be tended. Rule with wisdom. Rule with patience. Rule with love, but do not let it consume you. Only then will you be a true king. Jude bowed his head. I will, Father. That day, the storm outside finally broke. The sun pierced through the clouds, bathing the palace in golden light. The people gathered outside, their voices rising in cheers when they heard the news. For the first time, Jude and Lyanna walked hand in hand across the palace steps, not as a secret couple, but as the future king and queen. And though challenges would still come, though the road would still be hard, they knew they would walk it together. For their love was no curse, but the very heart of the kingdom itself. It was the fire that would light their path forever. The end.